Hello and welcome to a very special edition, of Renewables in Action for our series, where we are very privileged to host today Asad Mahmood, who's the CEO of SIMA Funds, for what's going to be a very much vital discussion on the role of impact investing in renewables energy. So Asad has been spearheaded, Global Social Investment Fund at Deutsche Bank for more than 17 years. But then he decided to continue his impactful journeys in co-founding SIMA Fund that was in 2016. And at SIMA, what Asad has done is really championing a holistic approach to impact investment, focusing on powerful external impact while internally nurturing pretty much a culture of transparency, but also innovation. That's what he's done. And the commitment that he has and the team has established SEMA as one of the leader in the next generation of impact strategy. And this is the gentleman that we're going to be talking to in a minute. Just that. So back to me again. So I'm Tony T. I'm the founder here of Renewables in Africa. So what we do is very simple. We raise awareness about renewables energy in Africa and across the world. So if you are a project developer, if you are an EPC company, if you are an investor and a supplier and you want to tap and spread into Africa, I would suggest you reach out to me because I want to show you how we can help you to definitely 10x your return on investment. So how are we going to do that? Very simple. So with our awareness packages, we can help you three ways. Help you to boost your visibility in the continent and help you to be visible to the people that matter the most for you, the people that you're actually impacting with your product and your services. From that visibility, we're going to help you to develop the lead that you want and obviously to grow your company with the sales. I know what I'm talking to you. Some of you will say, it looks too good to be true. Not a problem. All I'm just asking you, if you can just take that risk of speaking to me for 15 minutes, I'm more than happy to show you what we've done for other people and demonstrate to you how I believe it definitely is going to work for you. But today, we want to talk to Asad. Asad, before I bring on, like I say, exceptional individual, visionary leaders. And let me just mention some of the significant achievement he had, initiating the largest off-grid solar funds in the office era in 2017, establishing first code of conduct for the off-grid solar sectors, launching the first energy access fund in response to COVID-19 crisis, creating the first green bond targeting small and medium-sized solar developers, investing to groundbreaking affordable mortgage fintech in Pakistan, and the list goes on and on. I'm not just going to cover all of them. So let me welcome here Asad. So hello Asad, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can. It was a pleasure to talk to you, Tony, and thank you for the opportunity.
So I mean, it's me having to thank you. Like I say, so your list of accomplishment, it's really way too way too long. I just couldn't list all of them, but I'm hoping we're gonna have the chance to cover, a number of let's say the key highlights of your career and also the
Yeah.
fantastic company that you created. But maybe in a very short word, I'd like you to introduce yourself to the audience from your own words.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Appreciate it. I think out of transparency, Deutsche Bank had reduced its employment, so I was let go from Deutsche Bank, and I started Deutsche Bank's international impact investing and created one of the earlier teams that was looking at microfinance and impact investing. That is really the mothership of all that comes out of it in terms of energy, healthcare, education, agriculture. Because microfinance proved the notion that the poor people can be business people, and there is an opportunity to make a profit in dealing and serving with the bottom of the pyramid, as they say. So I literally cried because I was so devoted, and so I was fairly good at what I did. When I lost my job, it was not immediately that I cried, but after a week when it sunk in. And sometimes adversity is the best thing that happens to you. And for me, it was the best thing that ever happened in my life, because I started SIMA as social investment managers and advisors when I was 55 years old. and I would read up on people that had started businesses in their late ages. So the guy who started Kentucky Fried Chicken, and there are lots of McDonald's and others who really had started companies later on in life. But my family was basically professionals, educated, middle, yeah, class families. So we didn't engage in business. That was not, if I told my parents I wanted to do business, they would say, hey, go find a good job. That was the attitude. So, but my spirit, I ask for some forbearance as we talk about ourselves, and I don't want to come as arrogant to your audience. Was really, I discovered my entrepreneurial spirit late in my, 55, I would say, it's getting older. The reason I have so many accomplishments, Tony, is because I'm getting old. So that's years of work
Yeah.
that has done. But I wanted to be a painter or artist, and so I have a very creative mind, and that allows me to come up with interesting ideas for funds that are attractive to investors. We are deeply socially interested as well. We are one of the few or only asset manager. We have lots of good asset managers, but we are unique both in a cultural, as you said, we are a very transparent company, inclusive of our people. We have policies that says if you backbite or disparage, because that's the most destructive activity, we can fire you. On the business side, we are the only asset manager that has operating companies, the one you mentioned. We have a foundation because we don't think everything in development can be just done commercially. That is not the truth. That's not the reality. There is a lot of effort that needs some risk protection or subsidization. Speaking about subsidization, the whole, if you look at the American utility sector in the rural area, that's highly subsidized. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of subsidy along commercial venues, and a lot of microfinance. When it got started, there was a lot of subsidy. So I think the idea of energy, when you have 300 million people, if I got my, maybe a little old, maybe a little bit less, maybe 250 now, but about that million people in India that don't have a single light bulb. In some of the African countries, 80% of the people don't have energy. And access to energy, I mean, I can't imagine that you or your audience can think about their life without a light bulb or electricity or a computer or anything to do with modern day life. And that access to energy is fundamental to development, and
Hmm.
fundamental progress. I mean, I've been to rural areas in Pakistan, in Africa, where very humble people using solar energies for their businesses, running sewing machines or having drills and saws to do carpentry business. So access to energy is not just a comfort of life; it's a way of earning a living. It's a way of development, and it's if you look at developed countries, you will see all of them have consistent, stable energy,
I think,
and that.
and that's yeah. Yes, sorry, I think you were saying something interesting there. I just wanted to allow you to continue in that direction. So you mentioned in Pakistan, for example, people having solar energy and expanding that, and you find it very interesting. So why do you believe that solar energy is so critical element in the renewable energy sector, from your
Yeah.
experience?
Right. I mean, look, I think I'm focused on the development side of things,
Mm-hmm.
mostly in Africa and Southeast Asia, the poorest countries in the world. And there, God has blessed those countries with a lot of resources, especially solar energy. Every poor country is very sunny country in that way. If you look around the world, sub-Saharan Africa, on the equator line, Southeast Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, they're very, ready in this electricity. It's not just a good thing that energy, solar energy, that it is good for the environment. Of course it is. But what it
Mm-hmm.
is what drives it is that it is cheaper. It reduces cost by 30%, you know, so in the range. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really what's driving the use of energy. And energy in developing countries, clearly the geothermal plays an important part in, so for example in Kenya, but solar energy is the future. It is the cheapest form of energy, and its costs are reducing as the volume of activity is growing and its demand is growing. If you
Mm-hmm.
look at the, think about Nigeria, where fuel prices went, the exchange rate almost 4 times. Horrible economy, horrible, key indicators. So the use of energy is important. In Kenya, commercial and industrial solar have doubled in the last 2 years, because first thing is there's a reservation, right? You say, oh shit, it's solar energy, my expensive equipment, I don't want to burn my whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
once you get acceptability and people can see that it brings cost savings, it's healthier, you know for the environment and things of that nature, there is a real sense of you, you know wanting to do it. So there is a
Mm-hmm.
real business proposition in the solar side of it, and I certainly, I'm an advocate for solar energy. Clearly, it is the future.
Okay, excellent. I think I can only back you on that. So I know that recently SIMA has decided to expand or to focus into commercial and industrial sectors. I wonder whether you could tell us what motivated you to do that.
Yeah, I think that, as we started in the off-grid solar sector, the off-grid, it's a product sort of sector where they have small lights, solar lights, lamps, if you may
Hmm.
call it, for $40 that are priced along the use of petrol or candles or whatever. That pricing, it drives these small candles, small lamps or things like that. But then there are incremental ideas of lighting up a couple of rooms in the house, then TVs, and then things of that nature. Fridges now are becoming, it's quite popular in the market. Now, the CNI, in the off-grid market right now, there are two products. One is a mini grid, which is sort of for a village. They would set up what is CNI basically to provide that. It's a highly
Hmm.
subsidized sector. There's a lot of money being spent on it, but it is very, very subsidized, and the potentiality of it is there. But the biggest element of getting the in Africa, especially because Africa is such a vast continent, that these independent, small systems can be readily delivered. You cannot deliver, the infrastructure for the grid to reach, parts of Africa. Africa, you can fit China and America in one corner, and you still have room in Africa for other countries, such a vast continent. So that idea was initially, started, the whole off-grid sector, and then it grew into the mini grid with CNI, and the CNI, the commercial and industrial, is really the more viable sector because it's private sector. These companies tend to be more profitable. They're coming in from other areas that they were serving, the factories or the hospitals, in terms of setting up their energy system. So it's really an evolution of it, and it's larger and it's less risky. So for us, it is a way to introduce a third element besides the off-grid solar products and the mini grids, is the CNI idea to the dairy farmers or agro
Hmm.
processors or other that can get onto larger systems. So that's the natural evolution for us, and we see great potential in the commercial industrial sector. It is the fastest growing segment in the solar industry. The reason, it's private sector. You don't
Hmm.
have to go to the government. You don't have to get too many licensing. If you're below 1 megawatt, this process is fairly relatively simple. So that's why we feel the future is in commercial industrial. And most experts believe that in totality, if you total up all the factories and homes, places like that, the commercial
Hmm.
and industrial would outpace the utility scale solar idea. And that's the reason we feel CNI is important.
Yeah, and that reminds me that just before I jump into this conversation, because we actually do operate support as well, so people in the CNI space. I just have one gentleman reaching out to me because obviously they have a 1.5 megawatts solar plant in Nigeria and looking for funding, just to show that what you're saying there is absolutely true, right? And one thing that we know,
Yes,
you and I.
sorry, Tony. I think I would sort of say that we are the fund we did, which is one of the largest in the industry. It's $160 million. The whole thesis of it is to work with local smaller developers
Mhm.
to target towards sub 5 megawatt mid to small size projects. So, if there are developers on the CNI side that are looking for funding, yeah, certainly they can reach back to us. We are actively trying to invest money.
Okay, I think we're definitely going to relay the question to them. That's fine. I just wanted to ask you the question because you and I know that having the right policy framework is vital, important for the sector. And I was wondering, so how would you say your work at SIMA has influenced policy but also regulatory change in the sector? Renewables energy, obviously.
Sorry, I got a bit distracted. I have
So
a meeting
yeah,
with
no,
the
no, that's
SEC
fine.
in
Yeah,
about 30 minutes.
no problem. So I was talking about the regulatory sector because it's very important regulatory framework for renewables energy, and I was wondering how your work at SEMA has influenced regulatory framework and yeah, by any
Right.
chance.
I mean, I think since we are not working on larger projects, right, utility scale where regulation comes more into play because it's a utility, right? We're working on small. So our issue with regulation comes in most on the taxation side, because if they tax the product, then that makes it a little bit more expensive and less affordable. Because affordability, the challenge in the off-grid sector is between affordability and profitability. The companies that are serving them, it's difficult for them to become profitable without scale, and it's difficult to achieve scale without affordability, right? So those elements of affordability are very important for us. And I think that element of it adds to the challenge that regulation can add a lot of friction. And I think the enabling environment is essential for that. And Rwanda has taken a lot of policy initiative where they've made off-grid solar part of their policy, and other African countries are now encouraging net metering, things of that nature. So I think from my perspective, as I'm not dealing too much with regulation, I would say the role of regulation really has to be to facilitate the investments. But we tend to be over enthusiastic about regulation. And as they say, the regulators come in when the horse has left the barn. So it's I used to work for the Federal Reserve, so I can sort of self-criticize my own career.
Okay, excellent. Um, Obviously, you've had an extensive career, so working with Deutsche Bank, as you said before, and they, I would say, good thing to let you go because without that, you would not have created SEMA. So, which at the end of the day, in hindsight, is a good episode. So, what would you say since you built SEMA have been the most challenge, the most pressing challenges that you've seen in the renewable energy landscape? What would you say they are?
Well, I think there are a lot of challenges, but they are, life is complex but simple at the same time. I think our willingness to really devote resources to development and to do it in an efficient manner is still lacking. Um, we are still, sort of, you look at most of the development banks, they are under the foreign ministry or the US Congress or things like that. So there's always this development effort is linked to political agendas. If you do the right thing, you'll get development, and if you don't, you won't. And that's the seriousness of having a meritocracy that can recognize good projects and fund them efficiently is
Hmm.
really an idealistic state which lacks, and that can be a fundamental challenge. So if you want to change development, you have to change the instruments of development. And what are the instruments of development? The biggest investors in our fund are development banks. Without
Hmm.
them, you wouldn't have anything. But I think there's always improvement. There's room for the biggest, my father used to say, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. And I
Hmm. I
have a
like
lot of
it.
respect for my colleagues, very smart people. They themselves feel overburdened by the bureaucracies that are created because these are part of the government organization. So if privatization of development banks, so they can make decisions on deals in 6 months rather than 2 years, will bring a lot of efficiency, and that challenge is there, right? I talked about the affordability challenges there. I think
Mm-hmm.
the lack of political stability in the countries, the FX risk that we take is totally, it's absurd. I mean, the exchange rates are a real barrier to development as well, and to foreign investment in particular.
Mm, excellent. Thank you for going through that. I think you covered as well some ideas of some strategies people could be looking at. I know a lot of people will be listening to us, but you know that obviously they will see SIMA funds. So I like to think that you have an idea or who could be the leading investors in the impact investing space, and what influence would you say they have in the whole sector?
So I'm sorry, I'm not clear, Tony. Could you say that?
Yeah,
What?
yeah. So I was talking about, so what are the, would you say, who are the key leading investors in the impact investing space that you know of, and what kind of influence do they have in the whole sector, whether positive or negative, would you say, in general, as a sector?
Yeah, no, I think overall, the work of development bank is positive, right? It is
Mm-hmm.
bringing change. It is doing that. We are talking about, you know, making more efficiency and improvement, right? So that I think the biggest investor in development in impact funds still are development banks. It's there. They are the ones who started this through foundation, some crazy people, right? Who started the idea and that was accepted, and then microfinance, right? Was something that was just recently accepted, right? And when I was starting out about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it used to take me an hour of our meeting with the investors just to tell them what microfinance was. So now that has changed. So that there's growth in that, and I think there are also private sector investors that are, like the pension fund of the Episcopal Church or the Methodist Church, and companies like MetLife and AXA and others, in increasing a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
are sort of stepping to the table. But I think there's a lot of also what I call greenwashing. So there's a lot of recasting, that traditional infrastructure projects that were done commercially anyway are being called impact investing, and BlackRock is doing $1 billion funds, and everybody's doing these large funds. Where is this money going? What is the criteria? How do is there intentionality behind it? Those type of questions are still there, but I think the field is growing, that's for sure. The need is growing, and that's obvious in what's happening to our climate. So that it's a messy situation, but I think I'm always hopeful that human beings will ultimately choose a path that leans towards good. And I think so that progress will come when we have investors from the private sector side also doing things greater. On the private sector side, it doesn't take 2 years to complete a simple 150 million, $200 million fund. It's a matter of months. If they don't have the time, they have to make money. They're rushing in. Here,
Mm-hmm.
it's a different attitude, and that. So, in terms of influence of investors, I mean, I think foundation play an important role, but all
Mm-hmm.
of us, including impact funds, we have our limitations, we have our boundaries. It's how do you change those boundaries? How do you change the mindset? That really where progress comes through, because innovation is nothing but a change of mindset. And you start
Mm-hmm.
thinking, like, for example, we didn't give women the right to vote till 1920 in the US. It was not that women became smarter in 21. It's just we change our mindset. There will come a day where we'll say that, in poor countries, we look at the condition of the poor countries, and the people not forget, to eat. They don't have drinking water. It's just amazing that the convoluted nature, that the richest land in the world, Africa, with all sorts of resources, everything you can, they have agricultural land, gold, diamonds, bauxite, whatever, you name it, Africa has it. It's the poorest. And
Yeah.
you have to ask the question why. And why is it? Is it that the Africans are just incompetent and not worthy people, or is it that there are limitations because we still live in a post-colonial world? So you
Yeah.
cannot recognize you cannot ignore that development and politics have some interlinkages. So I
Mm-hmm.
think from that side, it's important for investors, private sector investors, and development to form and reform and to work towards meritocracy rather than political decisions to make a real. I'm very idealistic. This is a very idealistic position. I know where I am. I know where the realities are. But if you didn't have idealism, you'll still have slavery.
True.
So you have to have idealism to show the future that could be if we took small steps to reform our own mindsets without
Mm-hmm.
need of any more resources, just creating efficiencies through lessening bureaucracy can have a great impact on development.
Excellent. Thank you very much for such a very vibrant, I would say, argument on why we need impact investing. So I just wanted to, can you see, Tell me, just wanted to ask you this question because I know that you've gone through a journey here and you've been telling us about how you've had to explain to people what microfinance were back then. So, talking about impact investment, what would you say are the challenges that you've been facing regularly or before in convincing traditional investors to support renewable energy projects through impact investment? Because, as you say, the approach here is different. It's not just profit, some other element as well that you need to include that. So, what was kind of the challenges you faced when you were looking to convince people, especially at the beginning?
Yeah, challenges for investors, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's, you know, I think fundamentally it's preconceived notions, right? The first preconceived notion is, give this man some charity, switch the channel. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't, they didn't see the human being in there. I'm saying that is capable. This second name for Homo sapien is Homo economicus. We are economic beings, right? So that idea of recognizing the potentiality of people and these markets, and there's several books now written on the subject, right?
Mm-hmm.
That talk about how a private sector business can really have a recurring impact on development. However, besides the growth, and I don't want to be so pessimistic, there is growth. The reality of it is that still it is remaining in its fundamental and rudimentary stages of development, that there is still a long way to go, especially for private sector to accept Africa has a good potentiality. Not only Africa, but some of the the bottom of the pyramid markets in Africa. So that challenge is quite big. And
Mm-hmm.
then, of course, the regulatory environment is weak, the legal systems are weak, and all that is there. But I think unless it's a catch 22, right? If you don't make the investment, you're
True.
not going to change anything. And so so if you take away the investment, the situation gets worse. So you have to make the investment and to believe that your returns, if you go ask impact investors what their loss profiles is, very small.
Yep.
Not that
That's
they
true.
have not lost that much money, but the perception, the profitability, because they will accept a 7% return in America, but they want a 12% return in Africa, much higher,
Mm,
because they're saying, well, we are taking such great risk because we have exchange rate risk, we have this and that, and legal uncertainty. All well and good, but the idea is that every time you make money, that ultimately the payer of this is somebody at the bottom of the pyramid, right? So
mm-hmm.
that is we have to balance. It's a balancing act. Doesn't mean that you just do philanthropy, because then you cannot have a recurring impact. Once you have a business model, you can have a recurring impact.
Mm-hmm.
Once I was being interviewed when I was at Deutsche Bank. I used to get a lot of opportunities to be on TV and all that. And there was, I think it was, this Becky Anderson from CNN. She was doing side jobs at this time. It was 15, I think, years ago. And was me and Bob Enabler from Citibank, and we were being interviewed. And the lady, she didn't like me for some reason. And the first question she asked me is, how does Deutsche Bank make money from poor people? And of course, Deutsche Bank was not in that business. It was in a, it was just a corporate citizenship role there. So, at that point, I didn't think of it before, but what came in my mind is that when sick people go to hospitals, you charge them money, right? So why can't you, if you can, have impact, if you can benefit the consumer, that his well-being is lifted and you make a reasonable amount of money, that is human nature, that is
Mhm.
allowed by our society, and that is really uplifting these people in a lot of ways. So that idea really of recognizing the potential of impact investing and having some flexibility to make those decisions, are the key issues for private sector. They would have policies that it can't be illiquid assets, it can't be this, it can't be, so making it really difficult to nurture a market that is still young in its growth. So I think that idea really, for the real revolution to take place, there has to be acceptability by the private sector to do that. And on the second side, because it is not one thing or the other, it's not, life is not black and white. There's a lot of areas where, private sector can say, where do we invest, where is the scale? There is not enough companies that have scale for the amount of investment that the private sector could come in. So those are, sort of the debate, capacity versus capital, which is comes first. Is
Mm.
capital lacking or is capacity lacking? That's a
Catch
traditional
22.
development bank, development industry argument.
Mm. Yeah, I think I like to squeeze in two last questions for you. So I'm hoping that you're gonna help me in being brief with those questions because I definitely want to ask that they are very important for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to find out the first question is what is for you in few words the relationship between development and democracy? You talked about development a few times, development bank, development of the people of the countries. What kind of relationship do you see between those two, development, democracy,
Development and opportunity.
and democracy?
Development and democracy. Oh, I think it's fundamentally important. I
Mm,
think, the and democracy, is not perfect, right? You're looking at democracy in my country, right? I mean, America, since we are fractured, see,
mhm,
and we have the longest democracy in the country. So while it has its limitations, right, it is the best way to create, transparency, controls, not investing too much power, and development.
mhm,
Without democratic reform, and the related corruption that
mhm,
comes with it, you cannot have development. You can, but at the pace, very slow corruption. With, what happens when corruption happens? You're taking resources away from the masses to concentrate it in the few. And one can ask, where are those resources being kept? They're certainly not being kept in Africa.
mhm,
So I think those sort of ideas that are related to politics and development need to be addressed in with the sincerity to really get capital that is necessary. Otherwise, you're going to have people putting their kids in little rubber boats for better life and better economic opportunity. That's the level of desperation we are at. So if we don't get serious about making change through investments, we are not going to, see the outcomes that we would like to see. And I know I'm being a bit extreme on this side. There is progress. There is, if you look at Kenya now, and if you looked at Kenya 50 years from now, there's a big difference in Kenya. There's a big difference in Pakistan. But I think for us to hasten the pace of development, reforms, greater understanding, greater ability to sacrifice and to take a little bit risk. You're not asking for you to take, $1 billion endowment to take 10% of your risk. You take 10 basis points of your risk, and then you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that can go towards investments. Prudent,
mhm,
caution, but also seeding change and not being caught up in the catch 22 that without capital you cannot have. And democracy really, or stability, maybe a better word, can bring about, the development we desire. Without stability and with chaos, you will not get foreign investors. You will not have the platform and people wanting to work in that particular country. So stability, democracy are the foundation for development at a more efficient and faster pace.
Excellent. That's such a beautiful response. So my very last question for you, because I asked that to all the people that obviously I receive on this show, and I didn't mention that to you because I don't want it to be influenced. So what we're gonna do is just gonna be like what we call elevator pitch, yeah. Because obviously you are the CEO of SIMA Funds, and I want you to be talking. In this case, you choose either you talk to your customer, the people you invested into, or maybe to the people that are investing into your company. So you have 1 minute to convince them why they should be working with SIMA funds. What would you say? So I'm just gonna give you the floor. I'm just gonna go on backstage. You just have 1 minute, no more than that. So
Yeah.
first of all, you tell me who do you want to talk to, your investors or your investee? Who you want to
Right.
talk to?
I think both are important to us because we are in the middle,
Okay,
right? We
okay,
take
no
money
problem.
from one hand and we give money from the other, and we have to deploy money in a good way. I think
Excellent.
SIMA is a unique company, by what I have mentioned. Not good or bad, but it's
Okay,
unique. It's
hold on a
not.
second. Let me just go on backstage and I can let you go. So, what should they work with SIMA? No,
Thank you. So I think for us, the key proposition is that we are providing a platform in which you can invest, earn a return, and do good as well. The So Good platform that we are creating, SOW, like sowing a seed in the US, is really trying to bring retail investors to the international development where they can put in $500. Unless we have acceptance of impact investing as an investment category that is broadly spread and known, we are not going to see fundamental change. And SEMA, we are trying to sort of really work towards creating structures and funds that can really bring about positive change, and not just to do it externally, but for us as a company internally to present a model for a next generation company that is transparent and using innovative ideas to bring people together, to engage the emotional side at the same time, to do important work which is highly which is high finance. There's a lot of complex financing structures that we have created.
excellent. Thank you very much. Because I know obviously I want to make sure that I see you off in the next couple of minutes. So thank you very much, Asad, for the wonderful conversation that you had. And I definitely will be talking to you later on. But like I said, just an inspirational talk that you've shared with us today. And I'm sure people have liked it. So thank you very much. And I appreciate your talk.
Yeah, and my email address is asad at
Great.
simafunds.com. If you are a developer and doing CNI projects in Africa, please be in touch.
Excellent. I'm sure they will do so. So just a time
Great.
for me to be wrapping up this conversation because we had obviously Assad with us in here. So thank you very much for joining us today for showing so profound insight into the transformative potential impact of impact investing in renewables energy. And your experience, Assad, yeah, and leadership, SIMA Fund, it's a beautiful, beautiful company, so transparent. I was really struck, highlight the critical role that investment actually play in advancing global sustainability goals. And to our viewers, so I hope this conversation really inspire you to consider impact in your investment choices, not just profit. Impact, it's important. The broader implication for the planet's well-being and also future. So thank you for tuning in. And remember, each step that we take toward sustainable investment is a step towards a cleaner, a greener tomorrow. So let's keep the momentum going and continue to drive the change together. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that.